I'm a fan of fantasy, so I listen to Easy and Alan on their Just a Fantasy Fan podcast. Now here's Easy and Chris Allen.
And welcome to a Fantasy Fan Sportscast on a Wednesday night, 10 o'clock. Just one of the great shows on the Sportscrew Radio Network. Make sure you follow them on Twitter and iTunes at Sportscrew Radio. The Sportscrew Radio Network, creating sports, fantasy sports, DFS, and gambling content 24/7. thesportscrew.com. And Chris, I think the name of the show should be The Writer and the Reader, because I just read your stuff and you write this stuff. So, you know, that's kind of what it comes down to now. And that's what we'll go over, some of the stuff you write and that I read. And we'll get into some drops of the week and your quarterback streamers and all that. But, you know, I mean, we'll get to that quickly. But did a show last night, the League of Anarchy Fantasy Football Podcast.
How many people were on the call?
Last night, we had 8. There was 8 of us.
Okay.
And
kind of a tame night.
Huh?
Kind of a tame night.
It was tame. We've had big numbers. But I some unfinished business, because some people do listen to both shows.
Sure.
But on that show, it's us. So we just talk like, we only talk like it's us. We were talking about a trade that went down, and at no point did we tell you what the trade was.
Okay.
You know, everyone on the podcast knew what the trade was, because we're all in the league, we're on the chat room, and everybody knew. So we just started talking about it. And I had a few people today say, hey, you know, enjoyed the podcast, but what the hell was the trade you guys made and we're arguing over last night? So I'm going to let you know and then get your quick opinion, because we're only a 3-year keeper league. You are a dynasty player. So values of keepers and values of, you know, players because of keepers has some people confused, I think. You know, some people see a trade and see it really lopsided. Other people see it as pretty even. Some people, you know, because no one really knows, you know, what trade values are for keepers at this point.
Right.
The trade involved me, which is pretty normal in our league. I'm involved in every trade.
Sure.
So, you know, that's important. So the trade, I received Julian Edelman, Derrick Henry, and a 10th round pick next year.
Okay.
I gave up Marlon Mack, Devontae Freeman, and my 5th round pick next year. The only real keeper valued person in this deal, based on our keeper rules, is Marlon Mack in the 5th round. So for people who want to know what we were debating and arguing about last night, that was the trade. Obviously, there were people upset with me because my team is, hey, I'm in 2nd place. I'm building for the playoffs. Obviously, I got rid of 2 right now injured players. One with some keeper value to a guy who's out of it. Okay. And he received a 5th round keeper and a 5th round pick.
Right.
Which my selling point to him, because he wasn't sure, was because when you get a keeper, you get a 5th round keeper, but you also lose your 5th round pick, meaning that's going to be your pick. You know, you don't get your pick plus the keeper. So,
but I thought you said in this case he does get the
right. In this case, he does, because I gave him my 5th round pick. So he'll use his 5th round pick as the keeper pick, and then he'll get my 5th round pick to pick obviously whoever he wants. So I felt, based on everything I looked up, that it was more than a fair trade. You know, obviously, you know, for next year, you know, a 5th round pick's a lot more valuable than a 10th round pick. I got no keepers and now I have no keepers on my team.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where we're at. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know what the 5th round value is. I don't know. Is Marlon Mack going to be? I think we're still on the edge here on what his real value will be next year. I would assume and the news came out today. I've heard more people today make it sound like maybe we don't see him the rest of the year. When this went down yesterday, that wasn't the news. Yesterday when this went down, he was going to be out just 2 weeks, maybe. So
I didn't hear anything about it about 2 weeks, even when the original, I guess, surgery was going to be on the table for him. But that's news to me.
They said, I heard where if he didn't have surgery, he could be out a little bit longer. If he had the surgery because of the bone that was broken, he literally could possibly, with a small cast, maybe play as soon as 2 weeks or miss 2 weeks. Maybe that's how I word it. Miss 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I'd assume, let's say Marlon Mack doesn't play anymore this year. When would you draft him next year?
At this rate?
Yeah.
So let's see. This season.
Not this rate, meaning he doesn't play anymore this year. So it's not right. It's based on right now.
So let me think about it. So let's see. This season, Marlon Mack was a, 4th-ish round pick.
Yep.
Now part of a potentially 4-way committee now with Jonathan Williams showing up. We'll see what comes in the offseason, but at the very least, he's got Jordan Wilkins, Nyheim Hines behind him. Jonathan Williams, I'm not sure. I forget what his contract situation is. They could release him. They could release Jordan Wilkins. I'm not sure. But either way, part of a committee, doesn't catch a ton of passes. But still, I mean, I want to say he's within the top 10 of running backs for broken tackles. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he has to be on pace for 1,000 yards if he hasn't cracked it already. I thought he was sitting somewhere here.
I think he was on pace for his best game if he hadn't gotten hurt this week.
Right. So I think it was probably sitting between around 800 yards, if I'm not mistaken, total on the season. So, I mean, all in all, a good back. So I would probably put him back in that area if he was in the 4th-ish round for this season, and that was under the assumption that Andrew Luck was going to play, and that probably dipped shortly before the season started. I could probably put him back in that same area next year.
All right. So really you're saying late 3rd, early 5th, probably hit the most. I mean,
somewhere in that range. I can't see his value increasing given what we saw in terms of his replaceability with Jonathan Williams just kind of, going completely subbing in for him and then playing fairly well against the Jaguars, who have turned into a run funnel. I get it. But also, given his usage, I mean, he's more or less like a discount. He's a discount Nick Chubb in the sense that
because he is right. He is their, you can't say workhorse because he's not catching passes, but he is still in there on 3rd downs a lot. People, I've seen that a few different places where people will question, well, he doesn't catch passes, whatever. But he still is in there a lot on 3rd downs. They just don't throw it to him, but they don't throw to any backs as much. Hines doesn't even get that many right now, but maybe with Brissett in the offseason. But so
right. So that's why I can't see his value increasing to the point where he creeps into the middle to or even early 3rd round, given their situation. But I also can't see his value really dropping given what he's been able to do so far this season. I just looked it up. He's sitting at 862 yards so far this season. So
he'd have gone over 1,000.
Yeah, he'd have gone over 1,000. If he finished out the season.
Touchdowns are still relative. I'm one of those fantasy players. Touchdowns don't mean anything to me. Obviously, I want my players on my team to get them.
But four touchdowns so far this season.
What we don't know is he could have got 6 touchdowns the last 4 games. You never know. Touchdowns go that way.
Yeah, touchdowns are fluky or they're volatile as it happens anyway. Right. But for a running back that only his only contribution is through the run, to have 4 touchdowns so far in the season, that's not that bad.
Right.
I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's more than Leonard Fournette at this point.
Yeah. So I think Leonard Fournette only has 1 or 2 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So, I mean, for how he produces, on the how he his fantasy production being tied primarily to the run game, and he's already on pace for 1,000+ yards. Already has 4 touchdowns on the season. The Colts offensive line is one of the best in the league in terms of run blocking. I mean, his quarterback situation is fairly stable. They're also the Colts. They pass at one of the lowest rates in the league. So his workload should be fairly constant. They were 54-55% pass rate in neutral gain scripts. So yeah, I think that I would say his value is pretty steady. Right. I mean, if you're
getting in based on that, it sounds like if you didn't have many running backs and the 5th round came around, you definitely would probably take him. I mean, it'd be the kind of a, in that area.
Yeah.
And obviously in the 4th, it would depend on what you're doing. And plus I gave the 5th round pick. So he actually gets Mac and a 5th round pick. So
yeah,
I didn't think it was, it's what it took for me to get the deal done. I needed a wide receiver. I had a lot of bye people this week. I needed to do something. And, obviously Derrick Henry and Julian Edelman make my team a little stronger for the next few weeks. And
sure.
And so I'm playing for the playoffs. So I'm willing to give up a 5th rounder and move forward. And I don't even know what a 10th round pick is worth. Part of me thinks it's a 10th round. It's, you could probably look at a lot of different draft boards and go through the 10th round and go, not one of those people what I want on my team. And you probably could look at other leagues 10th rounder and go, geez, half the 10th round I would want on my team. I'm assuming that's just now again, I don't know if people in my league are listening. I also feel I'm a better late round drafter than other people in my league. Okay. So a 10th round draft pick to me, I think is more important than more than half of the people in my league. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
so they're also volatile picks as well.
I know, but same with you. You probably do enough research that you know the names. I mean, trust me. This is a home league. There's still people in the 10th round that go, I don't know who I want. I'll take another defense. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they just, that happens in home leagues.
Oh, it can. At the same time, and that can be a landmine, but at the same time, what was it? Deshaun Jackson, I think, was going in the 9th or 10th round. Devin Funchess was going in the 9th or 10th round. Yeah. There were a number of landmines, depending on what flavor or how you wanted to supplement your roster. So it can wind up being a great pick. It could be a great value pick. It could also wind up being somebody that you wind up dropping throughout the middle of the way through the season. I can't believe I even drafted that guy. Yeah. I think from a fantasy points per game standpoint, the research that I had done during the off season, I think we had talked about this a couple of times, but just looking at fantasy points per game based off of ADP, it just it's steep. There's a steep drop off for the first 3 rounds, and it kind of bottoms out. I think after you get to round 5 or 6 or somewhere, but at least in terms of fantasy points per game, your expectation for at least median projections, for 10th round picks is something around 8 to 10 points per game, somewhere in there, right. Maybe the high might be 12. Right. So, but you can still find some value there for sure.
Yeah. And in a keeper league, the 10th round, you can take a couple shots that are, I have an extra pick. Maybe in the 10th round, you grab a rookie there, and hope and
and even rookies. We've seen so far with rookies. You could wind up with, on the good side, with the DK Metcalf, guys like that. Terry McLaurin, who's popped a few times so far this season, or you can wind up with guys like Devin Singletary. who we're still trying to see if he's going to hit or not. So it's definitely volatile.
Yep. All right. Well, I wanted to put that out there because I know, like I said, we did an hour of the show's an hour, and we probably did 30 minutes on that trade and never actually, said what the trade was. And I want to make the people who are listening, now have some context. I think maybe that's the way to, since I'm the reader and you're the writer, I'm just saying that's, I wanted to put it in context so people can
it's always fun to, it's fun from a theoretical standpoint to always debate what the value of a future pick is going to be, because that's all it is at this point right now. It's just a pick. And then even if you put a name to it, there's no way that we'll know for sure whether or not that name or that person is going to meet value. So we can project somebody like Marlon Mack in order to at least from a logic standpoint, to fall somewhere in that range, but we don't know. I mean, for sure, what that team is going to look like.
And again, I don't want to go over too much because that's part of what we talked about last night too. The reason some of the people in the league question this is the first time in the history of our league in 7 years where someone traded a pick as part of a trade during the season.
Okay.
On draft days, there's been some keepers and some picks traded, but no one had ever traded a true pick for next year during the season. So, a lot of people were even questioning if we were allowed to do it,
right.
And I'm like, well, there's no rules say we can't, and I don't think I could have got this deal done otherwise because, I think he even knew Mac wasn't the greatest keeper in the world at the 5th round, a little value there, but by getting that 5th round pick, like I said, if I know I have 2 5th round picks and one of them is just Marlon Mack, I would feel pretty comfortable with that, and
that's fair.
And then I'll take someone else, because back same thing, you could end up with a Marlon Mack and 2 decent running backs in the 5th round, possibly, or a Galladay or DJ Shark. He wasn't even drafted, so that wouldn't even count. But you can end up 5th round. You can still get pretty good starters on your team. So, it's just, it never happened and we didn't know. And you're right. People were like, but my point was when the trade was going down, because even the guy I made a trade with was questioning the pick versus the keeper. He felt a keeper had more value. Maybe I'm wrong or right. As a guy, would you rather have a keeper? Would you rather have a 5th round keeper or a 5th round pick? What do you feel has more value? I feel a pick does, because a pick doesn't get hurt in the summer. A pick doesn't get traded. A pick doesn't retire. No, meaning a player. A pick. If you get a 5th round pick on draft day, you're going to get probably a 5th round value out of it.
Right.
Where a 5th round keeper, like you just said, we don't know. Mac breaks his hand now, doesn't play his rest season, has complications over the summer. Anything.
Yeah, I think a 5th round pick gives you a little bit more flexibility. Because it is a pick, you are, I guess you're tied to the ADP value that kind of shakes out as the public shapes ADP over the summer and into draft season. But still, I think it does give you a little bit more flexibility than just saying it's a 5th round keeper.
Unless it's a late round keeper, like in our league, for instance, George Kittle. Kittle in our league is like a 12th round value keeper for next year.
Right.
That's a lot more value than a 12th round pick.
Yeah, of course.
Because you're keeping a guy in the 12th round that would probably be taken in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th.
I still think George Kittle will wind up he'll still be at the top of tight end.
He's going to go in the 3rd or 4th, probably in most home leagues.
No, 3rd or 4th. I would assume he'd still be back in for 12-team PPR leagues, he'll probably still be in the 2nd round next season. Travis Kelce will probably be right behind. I think first,
and then Kittle. Now, in our league, Kittle's a keeper, so he won't go. Kittle's being kept in the 12th. But
I don't know about Kelce. Without hitting those same touchdowns like that Patrick Mahomes was hitting last season, I don't know if he'll wind up being in the.
You know what though? I took him in this league. I took him in round 1, pick number 12. There's a lot of people that were taken ahead of him that I'm glad I don't have.
Oh, sure.
Has Kelce given me, pick, 1 through 5 value? No, but he's definitely at least given me pick 12 value, I feel.
Right. I think it's been easier, at least from a fantasy perspective, to start Travis Kelce week in and week out and just kind of, ride in on the fact that he's playing for the Chiefs. They should week in and week out put up a bunch of passing yards tied to Patrick Mahomes. The touchdown equity is fairly high, so on and so forth. To me, it's been, for at least from a start sit standpoint, easier to put Travis Kelce in your lineup and just roll him out and just roll with it versus trying to find, I don't know, the Greg Olsons, the Hunter Henrys.
Yeah, but I guess it's
even
not
Darren
even
Waller.
I took him in the 12th pick of the round 1. Right now, and again, I don't want to word this in a weird way, but if you got Barkley in the first round, you haven't necessarily gotten your money back. If you got Zeke, you're not necessarily getting all your money back. David Johnson, if you grabbed him in the first round, you didn't get your money back.
Sure.
So that's what I'm saying. I felt, and we've had this conversation before, I like my first round pick to be safe, not necessarily to be. I gamble a lot during the draft, but not pick one. I felt Kelsey was a safe pick one compared to now. Again, I was picking 12, so obviously I didn't have the option of some of those.
Right. So you're kind of forced into it. If you were sitting at 6 or 7, I'd be really surprised that you wouldn't have taken Travis Kelsey there.
No, I mean, I'd already decided I would have taken I'd already said it in the middle of the draft that I probably tried to take Hopkins.
Yeah, that
I was taking
right.
Kelsey. That was kind of my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was staying away from the first round running backs. Obviously McCaffrey, it would be I think right now he's going off number 1 on everybody's board next year. We might definitely have a for sure number 1 in just about every league next year, I think.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think there's
PPR. In PPR, it's definitely a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So, that's the way that goes.
Mm-hmm.
But I said I've been fine with Kelsey and all that. But all right, then let's roll right into your article here. Like I said, every Wednesday night we get together and I get to dissect your article and let you defend yourself before I say,
I disagree.
Touche, Mr. Pussycat. Because we've mentioned a couple names on here, and then obviously we're going to start with your drop article. So where does your drop article drop, and where can people find it?
It drops on Tuesday, like early afternoon-ish over on numberfire.com. And actually, just a quick update, because we actually just had this discussion earlier. Brandon Gadula, one of the chief editors over, or the content manager, I believe, over at numberfire.com, for all of our work for next week, because that next week is the Thanksgiving slate. All of that, the Monday, Tuesday work that I do for them, that will come out like as normal. But the Friday weather report that I normally do, I'm not 100% sure if that will get published, because most of the games are done on Thursday, or there's a decent chunk of them.
Four games on Thursdays now, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. So I think it's like 4 on Thursday or something like that. But a decent chunk of the games are played on Thursday, and with families and all that. It's less likely that my weather report would be out next week. But if there is, just for a heads up, if there is anything of note, I will either have a quick piece that's out that I'll put out on Wednesday or early Thursday, so that people can have that information, maybe like quickly like change some lineups and all that. But yeah, it'll all be out on Numberfire.
And I think I've said this in the past. You're also welcome on Sunday morning to pop in on me and Lou's show if you want to do a quick weather report. We'll throw you in there if you want to come on with.
Gotcha. I'm normally doing like last minute DFS lineups and then checking with my
if the
draft day
people demand weather information.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that you have a place.
I hear you.
All right. Somebody I acquired last week, and I questioned when you put him on the drop list. So the first two here are reviews of last week. Brandon Cooks, you recommended last week, could be a drop. And now I'm starting him this week. He obviously is coming back a little quicker than I think I thought. When I traded Westbrook for him, it was kind of again, we had that conversation. It was more of a roster decision that I had to make because I had an IR spot and I couldn't cut Westbrook, so I took Cooks, and now because of bye weeks, I'm in trouble. I've got to start him. I really don't have an option. So I'm glad he's playing. Now you still, in your article, still kind of think he's sittable and or droppable. I'll let you defend yourself right at the moment because I need him.
Well, I mean, to me, it's more of, it's like, while he's a wide receiver that plays on an offense that likes to pass, I mean, try and I guess help me to understand like what his usage is going to be. I mean, Robert Woods missed last game, but that was more for a personal reason. They didn't really get too much into it, but he's expected back to play. Cooper Kupp has been the primary target guy.
The last news I heard on Woods is he still isn't back with the team, though. Even as today, he didn't come back to the team. I know they're saying they're expecting to play Monday, but he still isn't back with the team. So
they're still expected to play. So unless, I mean, if it's tomorrow or Friday, then sure.
Darn it. I need 62 and a touchdown. Come on, that's all I need out of Cooks.
But we haven't seen anything positive in terms of Brandon Cooks' usage it's been about a solid month or so now. And for Jared Goff, with the way that their offensive line has been operating, with him unable to actually throw deep routes, like I think this past week on the Sunday night game when they played Chicago, that was one of the first times that I've actually seen Jared Goff take like multiple downfield shots like in a game. And I mean that and surprisingly enough, that's against Chicago. But now, if we look at some of his upcoming matchups, I mean, I don't really see a time where, again, from a pressure standpoint, he's going to have that same amount of time in order to make those downfield passes to Brandon Cooks. Now, that's not to say that's all that Brandon Cooks is good for. I mean, he can run a full route tree, but at the same time, he has one of the highest ADOTs in the league, and they have two other guys that are perfectly capable of, assuming Robert Woods is there, but they have two other guys that are perfectly capable of running underneath routes that Jared Goff can hit on a regular basis. So it's hard for me to see how he continues to, I guess, provide or be a decent fantasy asset.
But if you saw him, so you're saying if you saw him on the waiver wire, you wouldn't pick him up?
No.
All right. The next guy you have is Robbie Anderson. The touchdown saved him, but their schedule is still pretty easy coming up.
Sure.
But it does seem like Crowder is the guy that's seeing everything there.
And Demaryius Thomas, and now Ryan Griffin.
Yeah. Robbie Anderson got cut in our league, but it immediately got picked up. I mean, he did not make it through the first waiver wire slot.
Oh, that makes sense to me, because you always see like players like that with that name value that will automatically get snatched up, but then they just turn into anchors on other people's rosters, and I'm fine with that. Yeah. I mean, if somebody else is going to waste a bench slot on holding a guy that's had less than 50 yards in what I want to say like 8 games or so far this season, and really the only touchdown deodorant has come in like this past week, and that was on like a quick, like it was on a bunny touchdown, like in the red zone from like the 2-yard line.
Yeah.
So
would you rather have Renfro?
Yes.
Okay.
Give me somebody that's getting more targets. Give me somebody that's getting more yards after catch. I mean, it almost has the same touchdown equity in their offense. All
right, let's move to this week, because you start off with a big name. And in most leagues, a first round pick, at worst, maybe early second round. And I've heard this a lot the last day or two on podcasts, and that's David Johnson. I'd pick him up tomorrow if he was on waiver wire. I don't own him anywhere because he was somebody I wouldn't have drafted. So far that's paid off. But again, I don't think I'd let him stay on the waiver wire. And at the same point, again, I would have moved him by now, but you think he's cuttable now?
Yeah. When was it? I believe it was last week. There was a gentleman, Kyle Yates, I think his Twitter handle is that like @Kyle NFL or something like that. He retweeted one of the plays like from their game against I want to say it was their game against the Bucks, where it just looked like he was jogging. I mean, he was trying to get to the edge on a running play, and it just looked like he was jogging.
You don't think it's injury? Do you think though it's injury?
Oh, it's definitely injury related. But agree. The funny thing is that he had no injury designation ahead of their game in week 11. So like, why, if he's looking that way,
they play games with that anyway. I mean,
I don't understand that.
I don't either. But at the same time, NFL coaches are nuts. Let's just go there. They'll try all kinds of crap.
But if a player of his skill set is clearly playing below his potential, and they know why not then just shut him down, let him heal, and then bring him back? Kenyon Drake has been playing well ahead of him. Why not just, they had it at one point, I want to say like 3 or 4 other backs available on that team. So why not let your primary back that has that skill set rest up, get better, and then come back when you really need them? Because they're on their bye this week. They come back and they play the Rams in week 13. They play the Steelers in week 14. They play the Browns in week 15.
Right. And
then they got the Seahawks in week 16. So like that's a stretch of at least 3 games into the fantasy playoffs where you've got run defenses that what are your expectations? So even if he has that name value, you're starting up against poor defenses, and he's already hurt. So why he becomes a non-essential hold for me.
Right. On the bottom of your bench, I'm assuming based on that, you'd rather have your handcuffs of your players than have David Johnson.
I would rather drop David Johnson, let somebody else pick him up, and then grab Chase Edmonds, who once he comes back, I'll know he's healthy. And then I'd almost rather play Chase Edmonds than David Johnson.
Chase Edmonds isn't available. I think hell, all of the Arizona running backs are already on teams in our league. It's pretty deep, and
sure.
So everyone's taking a shot that somebody. Actually, there was a trade last night that went down, and somebody took Drake. Is Drake their starter right now? Is Drake their
number one? He was last week.
Well, and I know that. I'm just saying, going on. Do you even if Edmonds comes back? Is he?
Yeah, I still think Drake would be the starter even after Edmonds gets back, and then David Johnson becomes a rotational player at this point if they don't wind up shutting him down.
All right. Again, not to be the person to question. The next one is probably the one that I might fight the hardest on.
Okay.
You say in your own 79% is Curtis Samuel. You think Curtis Samuel is a drop candidate?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much for the same reason that Robbie Anderson is a drop candidate. But for, I guess, Kyle Allen, I know that's
now. Wait a minute. You just said he's droppable because Robbie Anderson, because he's getting no attempts, no, he's not getting any shares or
no. I'm saying it's also in the same vein that I recommended that Brandon Cooks be a drop target. That's where the similarities occur. It's the routes that they run, their average depth of target, and the way that their quarterback is operating right now, or I guess the way that they're incapable of operating right now. Sam Darnold is less likely to throw the deep ball. Jared Goff is less likely to throw the deep ball. Kyle Allen clearly cannot throw the deep ball right now if he's throwing 4 interceptions and getting sacked all the time. So that's where, like, even though, I mean, you could look at, I mean, go to Pro Football Reference right now and look at Curtis Samuel's targets. I mean, he's still getting 3, 4, 5 targets per game, and it looks like he's a fairly productive player. But if your pass attempts, like, that are coming from your quarterback or ones that are either he's getting picked off or they're just not getting to you because he's incapable of reading the defense or incapable of getting the ball there, then those targets become meaningless at that point. Okay. So he also has that high ADOT that where those targets, those air yards, they're becoming unrealized value.
Right. But let me read names and you just say stop when I get to somebody that you wouldn't want on your roster.
Okay.
Mike Evans, John Brown, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Kenny Golladay, DeAndre Hopkins.
Sure.
Odell Beckham.
Sure.
DJ Shark.
Sure.
Amari Cooper.
Sure.
Stephon Diggs.
Sure.
DJ Moore.
Sure.
Devontae Parker.
Sure.
Chris Godwin.
Sure.
Cortland Sutton.
Sure.
Julian Edelman.
Of course.
Okay. I just read the top group of air yards. Way up at the top, I skipped Curtis Samuel. There's a bunch of names that you said you wanted on your roster. And when I like that stat with my wide receivers, just like I think in running backs, especially, touchdowns are relatable or questionable as far as how they just so rare. If they're throwing the ball and he's one in the top 6 of people that are, in air yards, that tells me any given week, he can get you 110, he can get you 80, he can get you a TD because they're throwing the ball to him, at least, a long pass here or there. If not, multiple mid-range passing. I would not mind. I'm saying, right, depending on the matchup, would I start him every week? Maybe not, but I would not. It isn't somebody I could drop just based on that stat alone. Just based.
But Curtis Samuel, he hasn't had a 100-yard game at all this season.
Okay. But that's my point. It's like saying, again,
DJ Moore has.
It's like saying Fournette has only had 2 touchdowns. I mean, it happens.
But Leonard Fournette actually has yardage behind that. I mean, the air yards is great because
that's because it's a running back.
Oh, sure, but I'm saying
we don't judge how many yards the running back had when they didn't give him the ball.
But he still has production behind that in order to, I guess, justify keeping him. Curtis Samuel, while he has air yards and all the other guys should have air yards, the difference between those guys and Curtis Samuel is those guys are actually converting their air yards into actual receiving yards.
But you have to have air yards before you can convert them, and he's got them. That's why, like I said.
But if you're not converting them, that means you're an inefficient receiver, and that means that's where you fall into. I just
named 25 names, all the top. He was the only one I skipped. They're all productive.
Yes, they are. He is not.
I find it unlucky. I think it's more unlucky than skill.
But you can't say that he's unlucky after having game logs where he has 25 yards, 35 yards, 64 yards, 46 yards, 70 yards, 19 yards, 32 yards.
I would buy low on him today, and I would pick him up on my waivers. I'd use a number one waiver claim on him right now. I'm just saying, because it's late. I'm going to the playoffs. If one of my top guys, if Thielen gets hurt again or something and I'm stuck, I'd rather have someone on my bench that I could plug in there if I have to. I don't think we're arguing that I would play him or not, but that's still the opportunity that, hey, second round of the playoffs and I need upside. I'm going to take a shot at someone who's going to get, 150 air yards that game. And
I guess if you have points per air yards in your league, I guess it would work out. But I mean, most leagues are points per reception or points per actual yards, not points per air yards.
Are you being smart?
I'm just saying. I mean,
but see, that's where we're different, because I still look at those as opportunities that just didn't get converted.
Well, right. I look at them as opportunities as well. But to me, it looks like those opportunities, he's continually getting opportunities. And that's not my argument. My argument is that those opportunities have not turned into anything. And he's gotten a lot of opportunity. I cannot
argue that. I cannot argue that.
The only positive thing
that you can rather have a running. I'd rather have a running back there. I would still rather have a running back on my team that they're handing the ball off to 25 times and he's still only getting 35 yards than a guy.
You've now just described 25 times for 35 yards. You've essentially just described Kalen Ballage. So you could rather have Kalen Ballage on your team. That's what you're telling me.
No, I would rather have Kalen Ballage than a guy who's only going to get five touches and maybe get a touchdown. I mean, that's my point.
I mean, you'd rather have Brian Hill then. That's what you're telling me then. 25 carries for 35 yards. I mean, that's what you're telling me. Those are the guys that you're talking about then.
No, what I'm telling you is I want players, especially on my bench, that are active. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I want players that are involved.
They can be anchors on somebody else's roster. I'll just give me DJ Moore.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'm so high above you in the standings now in the league we're playing in that maybe you can't hear me down there when I tell you need good players on your bench. That list is so big, full of players that are number ones and get big points. I get it. He hasn't converted them. But the opportunity is still there. There's other players on your bench, I'm guessing, that you might recommend that aren't even getting the opportunities. That's my point. The ball's in the air. So who is it? His fault? His quarterback? The team?
Air yards belong to the receiver.
Well, I disagree with that a little bit.
Well, I think the guy that started studying air yards.
I've read that.
Yeah,
but he can be wrong. My point is, because yes, it can be. If the ball isn't 100% catchable and it was up in the air for 45 yards and defense.
Well, hold on now. Wait just a second here. So first of all, you're going to tell me that all of those air yards then that you propped up Curtis Samuel with belong to him. Well, you said because he's getting all these air yards, that means he's this great receiver that you need to keep on your bench. But because he's not actually converting them into actual yards, that's the quarterback's fault. So which is it now? Well, no, it's because it could not be that he's not where he's supposed to be.
Well, no, it's both. You can't tell me that his air yards are down because every ball hits him dead in the hands and he lets go of it.
No, I'm not saying that.
Right, there you go. So some of the balls that have added to his air yard stats were probably not catchable. Back to Fantasy Football Pros. Is that the one website does a lot of, a lot of their stats?
I don't know if they track air yards, to be quite honest with you.
No, but they track catchable balls different than the NFL. NFL makes it sound like if it's just in an area, you get it was
Pro Football Focus, I think,
Pro
has a
Football
better.
Focus does theirs a little different. I mean, they go back and go, no, that was catchable in no way whatsoever.
Sports Info Solutions also tracks they track accuracy in a bit better way.
Right. Which is my point. I don't know the air yard stat that I'm looking at, if they're doing that based on a catchable pass air yards or that total air yard. I mean, you know what I'm saying? To me, that would make a difference. If they said, if that air yards things was catchable ball air yards versus overall air ball, might even be a better stat. And maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should come up with that.
My takeaway is that you just care more about the opportunity than anything else. It doesn't matter if they're earning it or not. You just want the opportunity.
Full of words, and you try to shove some in there.
Well, you said you just care about opportunity. You want the running back that's still getting 25 carries. You want the receiver that's still getting like bunches of air yards. You want opportunity.
Well, no, I first of all want, the guys above him. I would, I'd rather have Julio Jones. I'd rather have Keenan Allen. I'd rather have Galladay, even though Galladay isn't doing a whole lot either with his air yards. But my point is, yes, they are producing and getting the air yards. But my argument is there's a whole lot of people underneath him that are also, getting air yards that are getting less air yards and turn it into points, obviously. But those aren't the guys I'm thinking of. We're talking about people that would be on our bench that we would drop instead. Back to D.D. Westbrook. I'm trying to even think. I mean, there's a lot of people I can think I would drop and still have Curtis Samuel on my bench, knowing that he's at least going to see the ball. That's all. He's I think he's involved in like 70-85% of the team's passing play or downs. I understand what you're saying, but would you rather have, I'll say the same thing, because right now that's the time of year. Would you rather have Gallman and is it Armstead
handcuffs?
Would you rather have those handcuffs than Curtis Samuel?
Yes.
All right. The next player on our list is OJ Howard, which I'd have cut 3 weeks ago. I can't
believe he was still so high owned. I mean, but I guess it was after the Arizona game. Everybody
one good week
sucked back in, and he was 50 some odd percent owned.
Yeah, there's no discussion here. Yeah, 51%. That's nuts.
That was really surprising to me. I would have expected maybe 30, mid 40s. That would have made more sense to me. But yeah, I was really surprised to see he was that high owned.
Now, obviously, this one ownership 10%. Dante Pettis also should have been cut weeks ago, so I have no problem with that. I don't have a problem with this either, because to me, this is back to air yards is a problem and everything. But Tyler Boyd, they're not throwing it to him. He's bitching.
Now he's the squeaky wheel.
Huh?
He's the squeaky wheel now. He came out saying that his targets aren't where he wants them to be at this point. So we'll see if that changes.
Yeah, he's owned 91%. A lot of people are still starting him on a lot of teams. This is still a lot of bye week things this week.
Sure.
I would have trouble cutting him this week for sure. But I definitely have trouble starting him unless I needed it. Would you start Boyd or Cooks?
I'd probably start Boyd at this point, to be quite honest with you. I don't know. There are no defensive players or anything like that got booted from the Steelers for this upcoming game. So it's not like we have any advantages that they can take advantage of for this game. But either way, I still think because their offense, the Steelers' offense, looks to be pretty banged up or missing key players, that there's a chance that they can, and especially this week with Auden Tate likely being out, most of those targets should be going his way anyway.
Yeah. All right. Now you say that Auden Tate, I haven't heard any updates. Is he playing this week? His injury wasn't that bad, huh?
No, he got carted off the field.
Right. But it was it concussion?
Like a concussion and like a neck, his neck got folded up.
So we're not going to see him for sure this week.
As far as I know, I've heard no, not even an inkling of him being out on the practice field.
Okay. All right. I guess that's what I was asking. I haven't heard or seen one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I agree with most of those.
That's why I put those thoughts out there. I want to start the conversation.
I am keeping air yards on my bench.
Somebody actually asked me about Curtis Samuel because, I mean, while they're, and I think the common misconception is that when you read a piece that says drop candidates, that the expectation, or at least the assumption, is that I'm saying that you guys just straight up drop somebody. Like, no, they're drop candidates, but I mean, obviously you would drop them for people that you would believe them to have greater value. So let's say, for instance, if you came down to the decision this past week, if you wanted to drop Curtis Samuel for Deebo Samuel, I wouldn't have had an issue with that. I mean, that's a guy that's getting more targets in a productive offense and actually converting air yards into receiving yards and getting points for them. Right. So that would have been a decision that I can get behind. But actually, somebody asked me, like, what about just trading away Curtis Samuel? Sure. If your league hasn't passed their trade deadline and you can package him with somebody and you can spin it the same way that you're talking right now, saying that he's still seeing 5+ targets per game, he still has like one of the highest air yards like in the league as of right now, then yes, again, I mean, those are ways that you can look at it from a positive standpoint and then trade him away.
And again, I'll go to my roster in my main league. Mm-hmm. I have two people I would trade right now for Samuel. And you might say, yeah, those two. And I have Kenny Stills and Larry Fitzgerald. Those are my two bottom wide receivers. I would trade either one of those for Curtis Samuel.
I wouldn't buy them. Kenny Stills possibly.
You would rather have Curtis Samuel than Stills, or rather have Curtis Samuel.
Stills is a possibility, but not Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald hasn't seen like a significant target share in like 3, 4, 5 weeks.
No, I'm going to argue that. I think he did just a week ago.
Oh, and yeah. They played Tampa Bay.
It's a PPR league. A PPR league, he had 13.2. I know that's not a ton of points, but for a flex, I would take it. And the week before that, he had 15.9. I would take both those out of my flex. So the last 2 weeks, then he had 8, 3, and 3. So, you know, but before that, he had 13, 11, 15, 20, and 30. So, but that's my point. I would trade him today for if somebody wanted him, I would definitely give him away and take Curtis Samuel. That's what
you can have the air yards.
I would rather have the air yards. Well, Fitzgerald.
Hermsmeyer will be proud of you.
And other than that, I don't think. I mean, that's the bottom of my barrel. And I still have Armstead and Gallman, and I would keep those two because I have Barkley and Fournette. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'd go with that. All right, let's go with our quarterback streamers of the week. And man, Chris, we went 47 minutes already. One of us talks way too much. Your articles need to be shorter because I talk.
Oh yeah, I know. I think this week's 4for4 article, I think, was something like 2,500 words or something like that. It's not the reader and the writer. From what you were saying earlier, it's the reader and the rambler, because I know that's what I am when it gets to writing.
Oh wait, so I'm the reader, you're the rambler.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely the
ramble also when I talk. Well, Let's get into your quarterback streamers, and we'll probably hit this pretty quick because every weeknight now seems to be about the same few guys. But week 11 review, you recommended Kyle Allen. That didn't work out.
Yes.
Derek Carr did work out. Sam Darnold did work out. Dwayne Haskins worked out. All of them, were 17 points or higher. Derek Carr is close to not being a streamer because I think he's got a pretty easy schedule the next few weeks anyway.
I'd expect after this next week that he'll graduate into being an every week starter, at least outside of streamer recommendation. I'm assuming he'll crest that 50% mark if he hasn't already.
Where did you miss? What made you miss on Kyle Allen? What did we not see coming that happened?
I DM'd JJ Zacharyson yesterday, and he and I, we were talking back and forth a little bit about just that. I mean, because I know that him and Denny, like I work for both of them because I write for Number Fire. I'm also a consultant for Draft Day Consultants for Denny, and I wanted to get an idea for, I guess, what were we, like we being like the entire, I guess, fantasy community missing, like with that Kyle Allen thing, and just to see if the process was completely off, like in terms of recommending him. So he and I, we were talking back and forth last night, and really it was kind of discounting the, so Derek Carr is now at 66% ownership. So now he will not be a recommendable streamer going forward. Right. But either way, so yeah, it really did come down to taking the larger sample size, because again, for the first 8 weeks, like their adjusted sack rate was like 32nd in the league. But then the news like of Dan Quinn like giving away play calling duties, that kind of went as like a minor it became a footnote, and like the entire community just focused on the larger sample size, which I think from a process perspective isn't wrong, because we do want to try and take larger sample sizes into account and just consider 1 week samples to be outliers. But that one outlier, I mean, was actually kind of a big thing, because that's something that was sustainable. I mean, the fact that he'd given up play calling duties, the fact that they were able to limit such a potent offense at home in the Superdome, and put up 6 sacks against Drew Brees against an offensive line that was, I want to say, like average to above average. I mean, that should have been like I guess the red flag to say that this is probably something that we should pay attention to. And so then going against Kyle Allen, the Panthers had a below average offensive line against that new, like that defensive front that's been executing better, that should have been something we should have taken into account. So while the Panthers were at home, it was a high scored, it was like, I want to say either second or third in terms of like the highest like game total on the week. And so then the Panthers, because they were favorite at home, they had one of the highest team totals on the week. Again, it should have been something that would have been taken more into account.
Right.
He still would have been a streamer, but at the same time, he wouldn't have been like the top streamer.
And I know we're not talking defensive streamers on this show, but there's a lot of people that, I heard today go, I don't think I would have thought I'd be saying this, even 3 weeks ago, that Atlanta is a defense now that you could stream maybe going forward, because it's changed that drastically.
Yeah.
So people who made trades a couple weeks ago for people who were going to play against the Atlanta Falcons in the playoffs now might not be a good thing. So,
right. Yeah.
All right. The first streaming quarterback again, Sam Darnold. I think this is the third. Well, we've only been doing this streaming thing for like 3 weeks. I think Sam's been on the list every time.
Yeah.
He's on there again, and he's going against the Raiders.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the one thing that I've been noting each week, because it was like 3 weeks ago, he was like a deep league streaming recommendation. And then I think the week after that, I think I kind of like he was either a deep league or might have moved him up to not like the top streamer, but he was in the top streaming like recommendations. Right. And now here we are. He's like the top streaming recommendation.
And he's got a soft schedule moving forward like Carr. So right. Change it even more.
Yeah, and he's had some pretty decent matchups over the past few weeks, and that's what's kept him in the streaming column, but he just wasn't performing all that well. And just looking at some of his passing stats, we were able to figure out why. And I mean, at least in week 8, it was like 50% of his passes were like, just those short dink and dunk passes. That's where Jamison Crowder was getting 8-10 targets or whatever, and just like having one of those like PPR monster, like those Jarvis Landry like type stat lines. And then after that, it was like 48% like in week 9, 40% in week 10. And then in week 11, it was just like 23% of his passes were at like 5 yards or less. I mean, that's progression. I mean, we're starting to see him actually become a bit more comfortable behind that offensive line that's still either 31st or 32nd ranked, like a offensive DVOA, but they're still able to operate like Sam Darnold is able to operate like fairly well behind that. Now, the offset to that is that Le'Veon Bell hasn't been getting like the same workload that we expected from him, but that offense has been clicking. I mean, Jamison Crowder's done well. Ryan Griffin's done well. Demaryius Thomas has done well. We finally saw Robbie Anderson hit the paint last week, even if it was on a bunny touchdown. I mean, we're seeing more receivers getting involved in this offense, where it wasn't just a condensed offense. With now his comfort level rising, we're now seeing that start to spread out. So I think that with that progression, we can now have at least a bit more level of comfort, even though, and this is what I noted because I want to make sure that we have both the pros and cons to these streamers in there. I mean, like Oakland's defensive line has been really good the past couple of weeks. I mean, again, they were playing against Cincinnati this past week, so that's like one of the easiest matchups like in the world, and they still like racked up 4 sacks, but they racked up I think another 4 sacks the week beforehand. I mean, Max Crosby has just been killing it on that defensive line. So like while I can only assume that Sam Darnold is going to get sacked like probably 3 times, and he they probably will fumble the ball once or might throw 1 interception, something like that. I think still the opportunity is high for him to wind up like at least turning over at least a decent like quarterback performance, just like he did this past week.
Right, I agree. Then you also have now next on this list is Nick Foles. So I'll have you talk about him, but Nick Foles is also your person to look ahead. So is Nick Foles one of those you might be able to pick up this week and use for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's kind of scary. I know that from a process standpoint, that most folks like once they get into the playoffs, like they want to make sure like they don't want to mess with stuff like too much, and they want to try and stick with as many like of their starters as possible. But if you're looking at objectively at the matchups, I mean, he's playing against the Buccaneers in Week 13. I mean, you can't really ask for a better defensive matchup. It's not like the Atlanta Falcons where they might be switching stuff up or anything like that. Right. The Buccaneers are like one of the worst in the league. But at least for this week going up against Tennessee, like I know they're coming off of a bye, so at least that has that stigma of being a poor matchup. But either way, I mean, Nick Foles, he had the same like aggressive tendencies this past week. I mean, he hit DJ Chark on a couple of long passes. Like Chark wound up housing one of them. He was hit some of the shorter routes. Leonard Fournette was still involved in the passing game. He got a few dump off targets. I mean, Dede Westbrook got involved, but he wasn't the same as like we at least had hoped he was going to be. We thought that some of that chemistry that they had beforehand was going to be in place, but that's not the case. But either way, I mean, the Titans have been giving up a lot to deep passes, and that's the way that Nick Foles has been operating even after coming back. I think some people thought that he might be a little bit more conservative in his passing, but no, he was still taking deep shots, like just almost at the same rate that he was before he got injured. So I think at least from a process standpoint, like with Nick Foles' aggressive nature, while the Jaguars will probably wind up losing this game because Derrick Henry will probably wind up running all over the Jaguars, like run frontal defense. I still think like, Nick Foles can wind up putting up, because I think even in the game because they just lost against the Colts, they got manhandled by the Colts, but I think Nick Foles still wound up putting up like 17, 18, 19 points this past week. Right.
Your deep league streamer is Jeff Driscoll, who I think had a pretty good game this week. I mean, I really thought the Cowboys defense was a good defense to play, and that didn't work out. So when I see that means the quarterback, even though I didn't pay attention to his stats because I don't own him anywhere, obviously he must have been able to move the ball and do some things because they did score.
Right. And this one comes you can look at it from two different directions. You can look at it from the direction that like almost like the transitive property, like fantasy football. Like if Sam Darnold was just able to like drop 4 touchdowns like on the same defense, what do we think that not Jeff Driscoll could do to this defense? Like if we saw Demaryius Thomas perform well, if we saw Jamison Crowder perform well, if we saw Ryan Griffin perform well, I mean, even Robbie Anderson get involved. I mean, and now here come Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, TJ Hawkinson. Like if we see those guys coming to town, what do we expect them to be able to do? And all of that value then intersects at Jeff Driscoll.
And their running game's doing nothing.
Right, absolutely. I mean, Bo Scarborough came out of nowhere, right, and like had like 55 yards and a touchdown, was not involved in the passing game at all. Yeah. But still, I mean, so there at least is some hope for at least season-long people that wound up picking up Bo Scarborough this past week, that Washington's defense is just so bad that, I mean, he could probably wind up, falling into the end zone once. But at least for Jeff Driscoll, I mean, you have the rushing floor. I mean, he's rushed, I think, at least like 3 or 4 times in his past 2 starts since Stafford has been down. We saw that same behavior when he was in Cincinnati. He was running all over the place when he was playing back up to Andy Dalton. So even if Jeff Driscoll does wind up screwing up as a passer and throwing an interception or winds up fumbling the ball, his passing floor should negate any of that negativity, like any like negative fantasy points that would come from those turnovers. Right. And also, again, Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, TJ Hawkinson going up against that defense, at least if not all 3 of them having a touchdown, 2 of those 3 should wind up having a touchdown with the way that defense is played.
All right. The last thing that wasn't on your list, and obviously in single quarterback leagues right now, Rivers is probably should be on your droppable list by far in single quarterbacks. But in 2 quarterback leagues, is this just a few bad weeks? Is this, is he falling down the age hole, or, what's the deal? I mean, I saw him dropped in my super flex league. And Fitzpatrick was picked up in his place. I don't know what's your opinion is. Rivers, 'cause I like the guy, and the opposite of air yards, he still throw the ball up. He can't get it to anybody.
Right. See, that's where air yards can kind of hurt you. But I would say that, but for Rivers, he needs to be able to adjust his game. He is playing at 37, 38 years old, as if he is 30 and 30, like he's 30 or 31 years old.
The few games I've watched him though, that line's giving him no time. And unfortunately, you have no time. Fair. Right. When you have no time and you're that age, it's hard to get the ball out there 38 yards or 42 or 45. You got Brady works that 20-yard area
down there. He still wants to keep taking those deep shots to Mike Williams.
Right.
And I mean, they paid off a couple of times, right? Because I think he hit one deep strike to Mike Williams, like in the first half, and then on their comeback drive towards the end of the game, with a minute left to go, he hit a second one to Mike Williams. So he still wants to keep taking those deep shots, but at the same time, this is like the second time where he's throwing like multiple interceptions, winds up like costing them the game. And I think, for the same reasons that people have been criticizing Drew Brees, because Drew Brees has pulled back on how many deep attempts that he's had, these are the same people that should be taking a look at Phillip Rivers and how he is still continuing to try those deep passes, and it's killing him. Because he's more than capable of hitting Keenan Allen, because hit Keenan Allen for that short touchdown, and that worked out just fine. He can hit Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon out of the backfield just fine. He can hit Hunter Henry across the middle of the field just fine.
The fan in me, because I'm not watching the game as an analyst, 2 weeks in a row, though, the way they've ended the game, I've struggled with play calling. They're putting him in a situation where he has to throw it, No,
that last interception was his fault. That was his fault.
I'm not questioning his fault. They put him in a situation where he was 3rd and 10 or something like that, because they threw, again, I can't memorize, but he threw deep the first time, then something else, and then there was a penalty, and then I don't know. They never, they weren't using Eckler or Gordon there at the end. And I was like, they acted like they only had 20 seconds, but they had a minute and 20 seconds. They
didn't have any timeouts. That's why.
Pardon?
Remember, when they were still on defense, they wound up using their timeouts in order to force the Chiefs to give up the ball.
120 seconds is enough for a good quarterback without timeouts to at least run a few plays where you're dumping the ball off.
Not when you're 80 yards down the field.
Okay. Again, I didn't memorize the game, but the last 2 Chargers games, I watched the ending, and both times just went, why are they? It just to me seemed like
he just can't hit the deep ball like he used to.
He couldn't hit the deep ball. But when you have to hit the deep ball, it's a lot harder. That's my argument. I mean, hitting the deep ball, in the second quarter when you're 2nd and 1 is easier than hitting the deep ball when you're, a minute 20 to go and you're down 10 points and they all know you're going to throw it that far.
I don't know if pressure is a problem with a veteran quarterback of Phillip Rivers. He shouldn't be doing it in the first place. He shouldn't be playing in the first place. Then pressure shouldn't be a factor.
Can this problem be fixed with coaching, play calling, and Rivers understanding what he can do?
Yeah, I think that has to be a part of it, is that instead of putting them in those situations in the first place, they should be using Austin Eckler. They should be using Hunter Henry more. They should be using Keenan Allen a lot more. Right. And then, trying to move away from trying to hit some of those deeper shots. And I think that's what's gotten them in the trouble, is that, to me, I don't think that Phillip Rivers has accepted the fact that he can't hit those deep balls like he used to be able to.
It's hard. See, Tom Brady did. Tom Brady knows now.
Yeah, Tom Brady knows. Drew Brees knows.
His element at 15 yards, let him run 5 or 10 more. And
look at what Eli Manning was doing with Odell Beckham, before he wound up getting benched and Odell Beckham got traded. He was hitting Odell Beckham on those short 5-yard slants, and Odell Beckham would take it to the house.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to hit those deep balls. He was working with Sterling Shepard. He was working with Evan Ingram. He was hitting those guys on 5-yard routes, 5, 6, 7-yard routes, and then making his heyday that way.
Right.
I mean, that's what all these older quarterbacks have now started to do. Phillip Rivers just hasn't gotten the memo.
All right. Going into the playoffs, you can only have one. You want Eckler or Gordon?
To me personally, it looks like, at least from a run blocking perspective, Melvin Gordon he started to come on. I know it's late in the season. It's probably too late for a lot of folks that have held on to him, but Melvin Gordon's looked pretty good over the last couple of weeks.
All right. So you would, if you had to cut one, you have them both. You have to cut one on your PPR league. Are you cutting Gordon or are you cutting Eckler?
If I had to cut one, I mean, I guess I would wind up cutting.
I had
Eckler.
2 different trade offers from 2 different owners today, and both were similar. One was offering Gordon, the other one was offering Eckler. That's really what it came down to. I ended up not accepting either trade because our trade deadline's next Wednesday, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and I kind of think I have maybe better opportunities after next Wednesday with some people when they finally are out of the playoffs. But I'm just curious if you'd rather have Eckler at this point or Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, I think I probably still wind up taking Melvin Gordon at this point because it looks like he's functioning as the number one. I mean, he still does get some pass down work, and he's the goal line dude.
But Eckler sometimes, man, takes those little screen plays and 30 yards.
They don't do them enough. I mean, if they want to completely adjust their offense, I'd be all about that.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping the coach sees that and they do that a lot, in the next few weeks.
They should use Gordon and Eckler like Green Bay's using Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Have them on the field at the same time.
Yeah,
why not?
I would agree. All right, Chris, another good show. We went just over an hour, 6 minutes, but we had to discuss, my trade and the League of Anarchy Fantasy Football podcast on Tuesday nights here at the Sportscrew Radio Network. I'm with Chris Allen every Wednesday night, the writer and the reader,
the rambler,
on Wednesdays at 10. And then I'm with Lou Landers on Sunday mornings at 11:30 to 12:30, answer and start questions. And I'm there holding Lou's feet to the fire. And my bold call of the week was the Cardinals beating the 49ers. It was looking good for a few minutes, actually all the way into like the third quarter. Actually, it was a close game to the last few minutes, technically. I mean, the interception or the turnover and the touchdown made it look more like a blowout, but Arizona looked pretty good. Chris, where can we find you? What you got going on?
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. I'll have the week 12 weather report out on Number Fire. I'll running the forecast data tomorrow, have the piece out on Friday. And then, we'll be more playoff discussion for week 13 starting on Monday, Tuesday.
Yep. And, as far as I know, we'll have to talk about schedule next week. I forgot about Thanksgiving and what's going on. And my company's moving next week, so you'll have to move it around or do something quick or short, or I don't know. We can still get something in. I'll have to see what our schedule is going to allow us, I guess, next week.
Yeah,
I'm all about it being Thanksgiving. So if for some reason we miss all of you guys, have a good holiday. Enjoy your
turkey. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
Remember to set your lineups. There's a lot of games on Thursday.
Yes.
And we appreciate everybody that comes out and listens. Chris, had a good time. Always. See you next week. I'll talk to you at some point.
Yeah, of course.
Just say good night.
Good night.
This has been Just a Fantasy Fan Podcast. And to keep your fantasies going, follow us at justafantasyfan.com. Say good night. Good night.